Independent expert panel set up to look into express rail link delay, modest first quarter GDP growth, and Narendra Modi set to become India's new leader.
Hello and a very good evening. The government today announced the setting up of an independent expert panel to look into the construction delay to the local section of the Guangzhou-Shenzhen-Hong Kong Express Rail link. But as Evelina Leung reports, not everyone is happy with the arrangement.
The government today unveiled the setting up of the independent expert panel. Its first aim is to review the project management, monitoring and cost control mechanisms of the MTR Corporation. It will also review the government's project monitoring mechanism, covering the interface between the railway giant and the Highways Department, the supervision system and processes of the Highways Department, and the role of the Transport and Housing Bureau. And the panel will identify systemic and any other problems relating to the implementation and supervision of the Express Rail project and make recommendations. Justice Michael Hartman, a non-permanent judge of the Court of Final Appeal, will chair the three-member panel. Also on the panel, Peter Hansford, the UK government's chief construction advisor, and Andrew Whittle, who teaches at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Carrie Lam, speaking as acting chief executive this morning, sidestepped questions on whether officials will be punished if they are found to have committed any wrongdoing.
This is not the objective of the independent expert panel, but of course in the purpose of its investigation, if the independent expert panel comes across issues relating to how individuals have performed, then I suspect the independent expert panel will also report on those findings.
Chief Executive Leung Ching-ying stressed this afternoon the government will take necessary action against anyone who's found responsible for the delay. The expert panel is expected to begin work in June and be completed before the end of November this year. It will then submit a report to the chief executive, and the report will also be made public.
I'm assisted by, or I'm working with, two very, very qualified experts in the field.
Lawmakers also weighed in.
The committee does not have enough investigation power. They did not have enough power to ask the people involved to answer the investigation commissions all the questions.
We welcome the government's announcement today in the setting up of this independent expert group. Basically, this was what the Liberal Party suggested last week, that as long as the investigation chairman is independent judge, which in current case is a retired Court of Appeal judge, and the two experts are experts in this area.
But Tian said the panel shouldn't be tasked to find out who's at fault. He said that should be left to the government and the Legislative Council after they receive the panel's report. Evelina Leung, TVB News.
New government data showed Hong Kong's economy grew moderately in the first quarter of the year. But economists predict a better economic outlook for the city, with exports expected to pick up later in the year. In the first 3 months of the year, the local economy grew by 2.5% compared with the same time last year. That's slightly slower growth than last quarter's 2.9%.
This was mainly due to the slackening in merchandise exports at the beginning of the year, reflecting the slow improvements in the advanced economies, especially the US, which was disrupted by extreme weather conditions at the start of the year.
But it's not all so bad, as Chan cited a resilient domestic sector that saw the jobless rate drop to 3.1%, the lowest in 16 years. And since recent US and European market data has been positive, Chan expects this to benefit export-heavy places like Hong Kong.
So with exports likely to revive somewhat in tandem with the stronger demand in the advanced economies, and with local sentiment likely to remain sanguine under the support of full employment, And with infrastructure construction continuing apace, the economic outlook looks set to brighten up over the course of the year.
The economists are keeping the government's GDP growth forecast for the year the same at 3 to 4%. Chan also said inflation eased from 4% last quarter to 3.8%, and she expects it to edge down slightly more this year. The government said the home property market is still quiet, with relatively few transactions made this quarter. Home sales and rental prices have declined by 1%, but the government cautioned there is still a property bubble, with overall prices in March 41% higher than the property market peak in 1997. This year's pay trend survey points to salary hikes of almost 6% for senior civil servants. But lower-income staff who could be getting a smaller pay increase aren't happy with the results. Joanne De Silva reports.
Tentative results of the 2014 pay trend survey were out today. It reflects the annual pay trends in 110 private sector companies in the last financial year, and it shows pay hikes ranging from 5.32% to 6.91% across three income bands. After deducting the payroll cost of civil service increments, the net pay trend indicator shows a 3.8% pay hike for low-ranking civil servants, a 4.71% increase for middle-ranking employees, and a 5.96% rise for senior staff.
We work together with all the government bodies, the administration, and all the party participated in this exercise. And also we have the participation from a lot of companies. So I have confidence in the result.
But others were not so satisfied. Lee Wai-ee, who represents lower-income civil servants in the committee, said frontline staff deserve more than a 3.8% hike for all their hard work. And she insisted that the least they expect is an increase that matches inflation. Even though this pay adjustment mechanism has been in place for 2 decades, its way of doing things is far from consensual. Last year, law enforcement groups withdrew their participation, saying their profession has no equivalent in the private sector. Joe Chan, chairman of the Junior Police Officers Association, one of the groups that pulled out last year, again reiterated today the pay trend survey is not representative enough. His views were echoed by disciplined services representatives who also left the committee.
I think the government, the CAN Council should consider about the workload, the work pressure of the civil servants, especially the discipline service staff. The pay adjustment should be higher than the inflation. What I say, 5.1%. This is what we expect.
Joanne De Silva, TVB News.
China shows no signs of stopping its oil drilling in disputed waters near Vietnam, despite the deadly anti-Chinese riots in the country. Instead, Beijing has demanded that Vietnam compensate the victims and ensure that Chinese citizens are protected. Beijing has also accused the United States of meddling and creating regional trouble between China and its neighbors.
Even as President Xi Jinping reiterated China's peaceful rise at a conference marking the 60th anniversary of the Chinese People's Association for Friendship with Foreign Countries, the PLA Navy held live ammunition drills in the South China Sea, a reminder of Beijing's capacity to wage war if necessary. The drills wouldn't have gone unnoticed in Vietnam and the Philippines, which are locked in a bitter territorial dispute over the South China Sea. Hanoi's strong objection to a Chinese oil rig in waters it believes it has economic rights to sparked violent anti-Chinese protests in Vietnam this week, resulting in deaths and damage to factories owned by businesses from mainland China, Hong Kong, Taiwan and even Japan. In an apparent provocative move, Vietnam's Prime Minister allegedly sent a text message to Vietnamese citizens urging them to act in defense of the country. Now the blame game begins, with Foreign Minister Wang Yi seen here with his French counterpart, telling Vietnam that it bears unshakable responsibility for the violent attacks against Chinese companies and nationals. This was followed up by the Ministry of Commerce, which strongly condemned the violence and demanded that Vietnam protect Chinese citizens in the country. But that's not all. It appears Beijing is also angry with the United States. On a visit to Washington, General Fang Fenghui said America's pivot to Asia emboldened China's neighbors to cause trouble in the region. But US officials have told China that it too should take responsibility and urged Beijing to compromise with its neighbors. That was rejected by the PLA's Chief of General Staff, who said his country couldn't afford to lose an inch. Meanwhile, Taiwan said it would coordinate with Japan and other nations to press Vietnam for compensation. That probably was the last thing on these people's minds, who were just relieved to be back home in Taiwan after fleeing the trouble in Vietnam.
And here in Hong Kong, the Travel Industry Council announced all groups' tours to Vietnam through May 26th have been cancelled. About 45 tours and 1,000 people are affected. They can seek a refund from their travel agency. And the Immigration Department has received at least 8 calls for help from local residents. Yesterday, Hong Kong raised the travel alert for Vietnam to red.
India's main Hindu nationalist party appears headed for a landslide victory in the country's general election. That would mean the leader of the BJP, Narendra Modi, will become the country's next prime minister. Modi campaigned on promises of a revival in economic growth, looking to take advantage of the widespread dissatisfaction with the ruling Congress party-led coalition. There was a record turnout in this year's election, with more than 66% of India's 814 million eligible voters casting ballots. Repeated corruption scandals appear to have led to the downfall of the Congress party in this election. In Brazil, demonstrations against the money being spent on next month's World Cup erupted in cities across the country yesterday, some of them becoming violent. Meanwhile, special advisors from the FBI and some American police forces are in Rio de Janeiro helping to train Brazilian officers on how to deal with rioters. Alan Bugnier reports.
Thousands took to the streets in Sao Paulo, Brazil's biggest city, protesting against the billions of US dollars being spent on the football tournament, while the country has spending deficiencies in everything from education and healthcare to transportation and security. They burned tires outside the stadium that will host the World Cup opening game, set for June 12th. A protest organizer said the goal was symbolic and they had no intention of damaging the stadium. The demonstrations come in a tumultuous week that's already seen widespread strikes by dissatisfied labor unions, including bus drivers, teachers, and military police. In Recife, looters took advantage of the lack of military police, ransacking shops and delivery vans. Federal Highway Police tried to prevent the looting and made several arrests, but there were too few to restore control. Meanwhile, in Rio de Janeiro, representatives from the FBI and the Los Angeles and Chicago police departments briefed local security officials on tactics to respond to civil disobedience. A military police battalion then conducted simulated exercises. The commander of Rio's riot police expressed confidence that his troops will be up to the challenge. Brazil's leadership had been hoping the World Cup would put a favorable spotlight on the country, showing the advances made over the past decade. The protests also come just 4 months before a presidential election. Alan Buckney, TVB News.
And still to come in our news tonight. No vote in Lejko over Northeast New Territories development plan. A fatal ferry disaster in Bangladesh. And the Thunder finish off the Clippers in the playoffs.
What is widely known and apparently acceptable to some in Washington may come as a surprise to the public. Using donated funds for personal use, like private trips and hiring family members. Also, a hospital in Africa offering life-saving surgery for free. Saturday night, 60 Minutes at 6:30 on Pearl. Teachers on the loose.
W-I-P-E-O-U-T, wipeout.
Giving the toughest lesson. However, only one will receive a passing grade. Saturday, back to school wipeout at 8:30 on Pearl.
唉，又食呢啲。